This is the day we've been waiting for. Welcome to RDB 21. This is what I've been talking about for years and years, trying to just basically just give an introduction to why we here and what this is all about. I know you see the introduction. What this is not your average sports show. We're gonna talk about sports, but it's gonna be sports and try to be constructive, as constructive as we can be. Um, I'm a sports fan, so I'm gonna give my own perspective on things. You may like it, you may not. I hope you tune in. If anything, please like, subscribe, share, and this is our first journey, so I'm glad. Thank you for tuning in. I want to thank everybody who inspired me to bring me here today. I want to thank my wife first and foremost for letting me, just giving me the time to be out here and be away from home. Thank you, baby. Thank you. Everybody who's who knows me, they know I like to talk about sports and talk about different topics, and I'm real opinionated about things. So I'm gonna give my opinion on things, but I really want to let everybody know, like, I want to teach. I want us to learn. I want us to basically really just look at sports in a different way. Look at it for how it's how our black experience, how it's bringing us along, and how we participate in this sport, in these sports and things like that, and how it affects our lives, and how much we are affected by it, and how it really affects the world also. Um, We're gonna talk about various different topics. We're gonna talk about serious things. We're gonna talk about silly, dumb things. I just want we're gonna be serious, and just really be upfront, and just let everybody know that we really need to think about what we're doing when we're out here with our kids, and what we're teaching them, and what we're really trying to do. So I hope you enjoy the program. I hope you enjoy what we bring to you. This is like I said, this is our inaugural episode. This has been a long time in the making. Uh, I want to thank Rizzo for giving us his studio. Uh, this was something that I had talked to these guys about probably last year, and I really appreciate them, just their attitude that they came with. They let me know that they're serious about what they do. So um, I just really appreciate them for just letting me be able to sit up here and talk to you guys about hopefully something that we all can take, and we can all take and get something from it. So, well, here we go. I'm just going, like I said, if you watch the opening introduction, basically, like I said, we're going to talk about football. We're going to talk about football. Is football killing black athletes? That's what I really want us to really start thinking about. Like, how is that affecting us as a people? And like, really, should we be playing this game? Is really the question that I want to know. Um, like I said, I have my own opinions about it, and I know it's a game that we all love. I mean, it's the America's sport. So I want us to understand, like, what it all, where it came from, and how it all got started, and because that's what I'm going to really basically talk about today, like the beginnings of football. Um, Talk about like how it all came about, how who created it, how the game got started. That's what we're going to talk about today, and just like what part do we play in that? As I'm pretty sure, as you should know, we didn't create football. So I want us to understand that should we be taking ownership of this as a people? Should we be just understand what this is, man? Don't Should we really be invested in this? Should we invest our time and our energy into this? Because right now, like I said, it seems like time and energy is something that we shouldn't be wasting right now. So Um, First off, like I said, if you seen from the beginning clip, you seen some of the early beginnings of the sport and how football was played. The beginning of the game back in the early 1900s. Uh, there's going to be some names that I'm going to put out here that some of you may know and you may not know, but a lot of them are like you like, oh, okay, you know those names, but we don't really know who these people are, who these men are. We don't really know them because I've heard all these names and everything. And once I started researching this and started really reading about it and really just trying to prepare for this, um, I started to understand a little bit better about really what this game is, who created it, and like what was it about. Like I said, it was actually created in like the early 1900s. Um, well, not the early 1900s. I'm sorry. In the early 1850s is when they first started playing. The early the Ivy League schools. It was really like a almost like I guess how we would think of how golf is. Um, like really rich people, a game for rich people or something like that. Like that's how football was. It was for like the rich white elites in the Harvards, the Yales, the Princetons. Those were the students who were playing football. They started football. They started they started up football clubs is what they did. Back in I want to say back in the 1850s and the 1860s. I gotta get. I'm gonna do better next time. I'm gonna make sure I have all my dates and everything correct. But that is around the range that it was in. Um, Basically, what they did was they came together and it was one of those things like they had football was a source of manhood and masculinity that white men were trying to portray. Like it was something that they were really pushing off onto their young men to possess manhood and to be strong and to be masculine because during that time it was kind of like Reconstruction. Slavery had ended, so a lot of the Southern men they didn't have farms and things like that, or they did have farms, but they didn't have slaves to to show their masculinity to. So they had to find another source of masculinity. So football was one of those outlets that they used. So like I said, it was for the Ivy League. So they had formed up like I said football clubs, and what they did was they basically they would have games, and basically what football was during those times, it was kind of like rugby. It wasn't like how we see it today. They like I said, when you seen if you see the clips how they played, it was like a big scrum where they all just came together like rugby. If you know how rugby is, they all get the ball, they come together, and everybody just runs into each other basically. So what was going on during this time, and this is what I'm talking about, and this is where I'm saying about us and how this is affecting us, because they started this. So what was happening was they were getting hurt bad playing like this. Like they were dying. There were a lot. There were deaths. Just like right now, we're starting to see more and more things happening with football deaths, with head injuries and things like that. Well, back then, their equipment wasn't. They didn't hardly have any equipment, so they were dying at a rapid pace. Um, I believe in 1906, which was the year that I believe they had 18 deaths. So that was like the year when they began like trying to regulate football and trying to figure out a way to kind of like what they're doing now, trying to make it safer is what they supposedly say. But what this is another question, and I want everybody to understand: there is no safe way to play football, and I don't think we understand that. There's documented cases of that where we have to understand that football is not safe. And like I said, so back to 1906, there was 18 deaths. Um, they were, like I said, they were dying and getting injured. Injuries were just like how we see guys get injured on every play right now in a game. There was injuries; they were getting hurt bad. So I believe in 1906 or 1907, President Theodore Roosevelt, he intervened and he became like ambassador of football. Um, he started off as like they tried to put in some reforms to reform football. So President Theodore Roosevelt, what he did was, he was the president, so he could come in and he got all the Ivy League presidents together, and they had this summit. They had a big summit where they came together and had a meeting. And what they did, they came up with some rules and regulations where they were trying to basically find ways to make the game safer. So one of the ways that they did that was they was talking about implementing the forward pass. So this is why the forward pass came into play. It wasn't because this was just another way for them to try to be able to play the game and supposedly make it safer. Uh, they made a line of scrimmage to where, before there was no line of scrimmage. There wasn't any of that. I got some better information now, so I got more dates for you. What this was in 1905 was when they had the White House meeting that Teddy Roosevelt had, and he had that with Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. Um, what he did was they went there to discuss how to reshape the rules and things like that. He wanted to emphasize sportsmanship and the elimination of excessive violence. Another thing about Teddy Roosevelt, I don't know if anybody knows his history. Teddy Roosevelt was always looked at as this man's man type of outdoorsman. He's the man. Teddy Roosevelt. He had he basically he's the reason why we have national parks. Um, like Yellowstone Park and all these national parks that we have around the country. Like he's the reason why why we can't touch none of that land. Because he was like a big outdoorsman. He liked to fish and hunt and do things like that. I believe when he found out he was the president, he was on a hiking trip. So that was the type of things that he liked to do. So, like I said, football. If you want to see more understand, like I said, football was looked at as like this masculine type of thing that they were doing. Like I said, the rules changes that they were trying to implement was the legalization of the forward pass. It was the introduction of neutral zones between teams at the line of scrimmage. Um, the changes to ban mass formations and limit dangerous tactics like piling on. So, those type of things, that's what was going on with those. They called them scrums. That's what they called it. It was like a big pile, and, they were in there doing who knows what. So that's probably what was happening. And, they was probably hurting each other, which they were. So I don't know if you know, Paul Robeson was a famous black football player during that period, during in the 1910s. Like he was a real good football player. They said he was one of the best football players during that time. I don't know if you know who Paul Robeson was. He was a civil rights activist. He was an actor. He was a singer. Um, he played in Othello. If you know about Othello, he played in that back in the early 1920s, I believe. But like I said, President Roosevelt, he was the one who tried to get all those things together. So, like I said, he was a big football guy. His son actually, in 1909, he was injured real bad. His son, Archibald Roosevelt, he got injured playing for Harvard in 1909, and he sustained a broken nose and other injuries. And that was basically like, everybody thought that was going to be a big thing about him getting hurt and thinking that the president was going to try to change the rules. Because there was a lot of people that was against football. They didn't want football to be played during that time because, like I said, they were dying. So, you know, families, they didn't want their husbands going out there playing football. They were dying from it. So it was a big thing going on. Like I said, they got Roosevelt. He got involved in this, the president. He's the reason why we have the president is the reason why football is still going on to this day. And if you understand, as I'm gonna talk about that, we'll talk about that later too. But the president has played a vital role in pretty much all aspects of black players and just football. Period. Um, we'll talk about that later as far as how black players got involved in football and how they actually started letting us play. Um, but like I said, all these names, if you like I said, if you see who I'm talking about, and I'm just letting everybody know that this was a white sport. There was very few black players during this time. I, of course, they weren't letting us play anyway. But like I said, this was like a club sport. This was like a country club type of game. Like you couldn't play this unless, like I said, this was the man's game. This was a man's game. Black men, I don't think they consider us men, so we couldn't play this game. We wasn't good enough for that at that time. Um, but like I said, a lot of the names of the people who basically introduced a lot of this stuff. I don't know if you remember like I said, there's the name John Heisman. John Heisman was I think everybody knows the name Heisman. So this is where the name Heisman, this is who he was. He was a significant figure in the history of American football, best known for his contributions as a player, a coach, and an innovator. He also lent his name to the prestigious Heisman Trophy, awarded annually to the best college football player in the United States. Okay, what John Heisman did, he was a coach. He coached Auburn, Clemson, Georgia Tech, and Rice. He was known for his ability to turn struggling teams into great competitive teams. So I guess he was the old school Nick Saban. He was turning he would take Alabama how he took Alabama from being a struggling team back to their prominence. But what he did was he introduced a lot of fundamentals that we talk about, the forward pass. Um, he didn't invent the forward pass, but he was one of the people who advocated for the forward pass. He hand off fake plays, doing fake handoffs and things like that. That's John Heisman. The snap from the center. He proposed that. That was I guess what they used to do was they would roll the ball back to you. Um, that's how they used to play football. They would roll it back. They didn't hike it or snap it or any of that. They would roll it. So rather than doing that, he introducing hud hike. That's John Heisman. And he also emphasized, they said he emphasized sportsmanship and things like that. And like I said, his legacy, he ended up, he was the director of the Downtown Athletic Club. As we know, to this day, that's where they give out the Heisman Trophy. The club created an award for his name in 1935, the Heisman Memorial Trophy in his honor. And following his death in 1936, that's when they started giving out the Heisman Trophy. Another person who was pretty prominent was Walter Camp. Walter Camp, I don't know if you know Walter Camp, but if you ever, the Walter Camp Award, that's given to the top college player. They always say whoever wins the Walter Camp Award is either he is or isn't going to win the Heisman. So I never really understood their connection, but I see they both were around during that time. And Walter Camp, he actually was the one who invented the forward pass. Um, Walter Camp invented the line of scrimmage. Um, he invented a down and distance system, where he established the rules requiring teams to gain 5 yards in 3 downs, which they later changed it to 10 yards on 4 downs to retain possession of the ball. So he invented the down and distance, uh, standardized team size. They used to play 15 players. Like, I guess that's how rugby players used to play. So he's the one who changed it to 11 players. So he's the reason why there's 11 players on the field. Um, yeah, just like the snap, he helped create the snap, the scoring system. That's Walter Camp. He did all that. Like these are the founders and the creators of this game that we play today. Once again, not black guys. So um, I just basically, like I said, what I'm trying to get on to, as far as like I'm just what we're what I'm trying to say as far as that is, um, these are the guys who they created the sport, and they created it for them to be a game safer for them to play because it was something that they like to do, and it was something that they wanted to do. Um, there was a period of time where, you know, they excluded black players, and so like the first there. Okay, I'm gonna give you the beginning stages. There's a lot of black players who did play during this time. Um, I don't know. There's this something. This is going to be another topic that maybe we'll have in a later episode. But this is something that I've always been interested in. Just like how they talk about Jackie Robinson is supposedly the first black baseball player, but you never hear him say about the first black football player. Like who is he? Like even though, and once again, Jackie Robinson wasn't the first black baseball player. So that's another lie that they be telling us that we don't understand. From what I know, Moses Fleetwood Jackson, look up his name. Moses Fleetwood Jackson, he's from Toledo, Ohio. He killed a white man too and wrote a book about it. Look him up. I wonder why we don't know about him. But getting back to the black players, there were black players that were playing during this period of time. William Henry Lewis, he was a standout player for Amherst College and later at Harvard University in 1890s. Uh, Lewis was one of the first black athletes to play collegiate football. He later became the first black assistant coach in football, helping Harvard's team achieve success. So he ended up Richard William Henry Lewis. He ended up becoming an assistant coach for Harvard during his time. This is in the 1890s that these players played. George Flippin played for the University of Nebraska in the late 1890s and was known for his exceptional skills as a halfback. Despite facing racial prejudice, he became one of the school's best players. So, I mean, we know what that was. He was facing a lot of racism and he was facing a lot of hate. So just imagine black players playing back during those times and just how hard it was on them during that period. So I just want us to think about that also. We weren't really allowed to even play during that time. So uh, in the early 1900s, there were only a couple of players that we actually know about during that time also, which is Charles Fallis. Charles Fallis, he's known as the Black Cyclone. Fallis became the first black professional football player when he signed a contract with the Shelby Blues in 1904. Fallis was highly respected for his athletic prowess, but retired early due to racial hostility he faced. Once again, so he played. I had never heard, a lot of these people that I'm telling you guys about. I never heard of these guys myself. And like I said, I love football. So this is something that I wish that we need to be doing. We need to go back and look at the history and all this and like what was going on during these periods. So like I said, every player that I just told, they all basically was facing some racial issues, which shouldn't be really shouldn't be a surprise. And this player here, this is the one guy who I've heard of before. I kind of knew him. I've heard of him, which is Fritz Pollard, and that's one of whenever they talk about like the first black football players, like he's usually one of the guys that they talk about. That's who I thought he was. But once I started doing this research, like I said, I seen that there was a few more guys ahead of him, a few years ahead of him who was playing in the 1800s. And Fritz Pollard, he played in the 1920s. And he became a trailblazer as both a player and a coach in the NFL. In 1921, he was the league's first black head coach while playing for the Akron Pros. The Akron Pros, yes, that's Akron, Ohio. Not too far from here. That's another thing too about this area. Right here where we are right now, we're not too far away from the founding of the NFL. It's right around the corner around here. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna try to get that information here in a little bit, but I'm gonna try to find out. There's one of these buildings around here. I want to say it might be the Lebec. I'm not sure, but that's where they made the deal to create the NFL right here in Columbus, Ohio. So Columbus, Ohio period this is really the birthplace of football. This is why Ohio State is who they are. This is why Ohio State is what it is. This is why we don't have a pro football team. Ohio State is our pro football team because they're the big business around here. They're the money maker, and that's just how it is. If you ever wonder why, it's Ohio State. Ohio State is the reason why we don't have any pro football teams. But like I said, a lot of these players, like I said, they were facing a lot of racism, and during that period, there was a period after that, after Fritz Pollard from the 1920s. There was let me find it here. There's a period of time where, okay, here we go. From 1934 to 1946, there were no black players in the NFL. This period of exclusion was following earlier years when few black players had completed had competed at the highest levels. I'm sorry. So that's basically saying is from 1934 to 1946, the NFL excluded all black players. Like I said, and what they're saying before that, they really only had maybe one or two. So from that period on, like I said, we didn't even get to play football, just like in baseball, just like in basketball, and we're gonna talk about that's something. Like I said, we're gonna talk about all these periods of time eventually. Like if you see my hat, like Black Fives, you should. If you know what that is, then you understand it's the same thing. Black Fives, that's what black players were before they start playing in the NBA. So there's always been a period of time in all these sports that we see here, like just like today. Today's Saturday. I had to drive through traffic. I was driving through all this traffic. Where is they coming from? Ohio State Buckeyes. They just knocked off Indiana today. It was a big game here in Columbus today. So this is what moves. This is what moves our city. So like I said, man, it's a lot of things that's going on in this area that we got to understand as far as what's happening with football and how it's affecting us as people. Okay, now I gave you a list of a few guys: Teddy Roosevelt, Walter Camp, John Heisman. Those guys, like I said, they were instrumental in basically putting football together. Now, this guy here I'm gonna talk about, which I think a lot of people pretty much know about. His name is Glenn Scobie Pop Warner. Now that this guy he's real important, man. This is a guy who once I started understanding who he was and understanding how he came about and what he was doing, like that's when I really started saying like, wow, this sport is like it's been exploiting us for years. Like that's basically that's what it's for. So basically, like I said, I don't know if you know Little League football, if you play Little League football. um, I never played in a Pop Warner league, but I've heard of it. It was always talked about, but you know, we played in our city leagues or whatever. It wasn't Pop Warner. I don't really even know anybody who played in Pop Warner, but there may be some Pop Warner leagues around here. I really don't even know, but I always heard the name. It was like a name that was a national little league brand. So basically, Glenn Pop Warner, he was one of the most influential figures in the development of American football, both as a coach and as a strategist, known for his innovative contributions to the sport. Warner left a legacy that endures into modern football. He is also remembered for his mentorship of Jim Thorpe, one of the greatest athletes in history, whom he discovered and coached at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Okay, now that was why I wanted to talk about Glenn Pop Warner and his relationship with Jim Thorpe. I think that's something that we don't understand. I heard of Jim Thorpe. I knew Jim Thorpe was the world's greatest athlete. Jim Thorpe has a sad story, and how Glenn Pop Warner, what Glenn Pop Warner was the Glen the Carlisle Indian Industrial School was basically a boarding school for Indians. This is where they were taking their kids. I don't know if you ever heard of how they were saying they were assimilating the Indians. This is how the Indians got assimilated to white culture. They would put their kids in boarding schools. Jim Thorpe, he got put into a boarding school because his family had passed away, and he was just living with just him and he had a twin brother. And I'm not for sure. I don't want to mistake, but I believe Jim Thorpe's twin brother passed away, but I'm not sure. But he had a pretty tough upbringing. So, like I said, he was put into a boarding school. That's how him and Pop Warner got together. That was Pop Warner. That was what he was doing. But what Pop Warner did was Pop Warner coached several colleges, including Cornell, Carlisle, Pittsburgh, Stanford, and Temple. He had a career of over 4 decades. He had a record of, he won 319 games, making him one of the winningest coaches of all time. They consider him to be a tactical pioneer. He was one of the founders of the single wing formation, the double wing formation. They said the spiral punt. I guess he emphasized having spiral punts for greater distance and control. So that was something that he was an innovator of. He encouraged wearing pads and helmets, and and I guess he introduced the screen pass. So he was one of these, like I said, another one of these Walter Camp. They were the guys they were the guys who were putting this game together and making the rules and setting everything up. They're the guys who did all this. But like I said, Pop Warner was leading the Carlisle Institute. And like I said, I don't know if we know what goes on, if people understand. Those schools it was a lot of abuse happening at those schools. Indians, they were being abused sexually, physically. It was a lot of things going on. So Jim Thorpe, like him and Pop Warner, Pop Warner took him off to the pros with him, and they ended up he was on the pro team. When Jim Thorpe had went off to the Olympics, he had came back, and they took they took his medals away from him. So when they took Jim Thorpe's medals away, he went to Pop Warner to ask Pop Warner, help me out, Pop. Like, I know you can talk to them. Like, I know you know them. So what happened? What you think Jim Thorpe got his medals back? No, Jim Thorpe was Pop Warner treated him like an Indian. That's basically what happened. So that's one thing. I'm just going to that's just a little pinch of little piece of what Pop Warner, his personality. So I just wanted everybody to understand, like, that's what Pop Warner did back during that time. Like I said, these are all white men who have founded this game. They are our role models who we look up to. And they're the ones who have influenced what we're doing out here playing this game. So basically, I wanted to go back and we're just going to recap basically who we talked about. We talked about Teddy Roosevelt, the President of the United States. He played an influential role into making sure that the game was supposedly going to be safer, which is still not to this day, which it will never be. We had John Heisman, we had Walter Camp, and we have Pop Warner. These are all three guys who were, back during those times, they would be considered, I guess, politically, they have a lot of political power as far as with this going, because like I said, Teddy Roosevelt was inviting these guys to the White House to basically create some rules to make the game better, and these were the guys that he was consulting with. So, like I said, they all basically broke down the game, made the game, and evolved the game, and made it for them. What we're going to get to in our next series, and I'm just letting you know, this is just part one. So part two, stay tuned for that for the next episode. We're going to actually get into really what concussions have done, what heat heat exhaustion, things like that, how that has affected uh, players during our modern times, and who are the players that this has affected. Um, I'm not going to say that white players don't play because they do, and white players they are affected by this. So I'm not trying to say that they aren't, but yeah, they're always casualties of what goes on. So they're casualties of this. This I would say this is a war that we don't really understand is happening. So yeah, they're casualties. They're casualties of it, just like they're casualties. So I want us to understand where everything is leading to as far as what's happening now, and like I said, who is this being pushed on, and who are the players that are playing. It's like I said, Pop Warner, he took Jim Thorpe and turned him into a national icon, made him a superstar. He Jim Thorpe went on to become one of the he helped found the NFL when the NFL came in. I think he played in the NFL. He was like one of the big draws for the NFL to get the NFL going to when it first got started. Jim Thorpe. So Jim Thorpe was a Native American. Who are the Native Americans? They're the ones. They're I would say they're the first people who this when they came over here to America. The Native Americans are the ones who felt they're the non-white people who felt the brunt of the white man coming over to this country. So we don't really even see any too many more Native Americans even running around. I don't know if I don't see any. So I mean, we know what they've done to them. And we see, like I said, Jim Thorpe was their first model of the game. He was the first model of a superstar, of just being able to promote the game and making the game better. It wasn't a white player, it was a non-white player. So just like right now, today, there are a lot of non-white players playing this game, but the majority of the guys who they uplift and who they say are the greatest or whatever, they're the white players. But the non-white players are the majority of the players, and they're the ones who are, they're trying to make sure that they stay out there playing this game. So that's something that we're going to look at next week. We're going to talk about how it's affecting us, what concussions are doing. We're going to talk about all the players that we know. Damar Hamlin, Tua Tagovailoa. Those are the two names that I think everybody pretty much knows. We're gonna talk about them in depth. Um, I appreciate everybody listening, and please tune in. We're gonna have some more content. This is just the beginning of what we're trying to do. This is something that, like I said, this is something I've been trying to manifest for a long time, man. I'm just thankful to be here right now. Like I told you, I really didn't explain the meaning of the name. The name of our show is RDB21. That's my nephew. He passed away. That was his little moniker that he went by, Roy the Boy. They called him RDB. He passed away in 2021. Um, he was only 18 years old. So that's my inspiration for this. I hope he's looking down on me right now. I hope I'm making him proud. This is something I want. I want my family. I want everybody to understand. Like, I'm not just out here talking about whatever. I want us to understand. We gonna have fun, and we're gonna talk about some serious stuff, and we're gonna get to it. So thanks for tuning in. We're gonna see you again next time. Let's get ready for part 2. It's coming soon.